Welcome to Brothers Talking, a monthly program that will bring a cross-generational group of Black men together, creating a safe and brave space for honest, fearless discussion about the issues and challenges and fears faced by Black men. The goal of Brothers Talking is to amplify and explore the lived experiences of Black men, the pain, joy, success, failure, and resulting opportunities for growth and self-discovery. Over the next several months, an incredible group of brothers will join me on this film journey of conversation and community, self-awareness and self-actualization. Nonprofit CEO Jeffrey Beckham, entrepreneur George Davis, operating stationary engineer Dion Hill, pastor Dr. Aaron McLeod, legislative associate Justice Pugh, and entrepreneur Josh Sanders. This month, the brothers and I gathered at Muse Coffee Studio in the Tri-Taylor area to share space and together unpack the topic of Black masculinity. For generations, Black men have been defined by others through stereotypes, through headlines, through images that rarely capture the full truth of who we are. Too often, Black masculinity has been framed as dangerous, destructive, or one-dimensional, stripping away the tenderness, vulnerability, and brilliance that exist in our lives. The reality tells a different story. Studies show that nearly 70% of Black fathers who live with their children are among the most involved of any racial group, reading to their kids, helping with homework, and providing daily care. Yet that narrative is rarely highlighted. Instead, images of absenteeism or aggression dominate the screen. At the same time, the weight we carry is real. Black men are more than twice as likely to die from hypertension and heart disease, conditions fueled by chronic stress. Suicide rates for young Black men have risen dramatically in the past decade, even as conversations around mental health remain stigmatized. These statistics remind us that the story of masculinity is not just cultural, it is about life and survival. And yet, there is resilience. There are brotherhood circles, barbershop conversations, healing groups, and grassroots organizations across this city, Chicago, where Black men are choosing to tell their own stories, uplift each other, and create new definitions of strength. Tonight, the brothers and I work to reclaim our narrative. Fellas, so we're back for another conversation. When you hear the term or phrase Black masculinity, what does that mean to you, and how has that definition changed over time?
I mean, I'll kick us off.
Okay.
It's interesting, man. That term I've thought about this as we talked about the topic. And I think manhood and masculinity, in terms of how we define it in our community, means, taking care of home, taking care of your family, taking care of your community, being willing to step up and do the hard things. I think we've crossed masculinity far too often with like this idea of toughness, this idea of what are these definitions of manhood that often don't equate to what it actually means to be a man. It's a tough term. It's a tough one to kind of deal with and kick around. But I think I'm excited to dive in with the fellas and hear some of the other guys' thoughts.
I think it invokes that a Black man should be strong, responsible, caring, a priest, a provider, a protector. But I think that it should evoke the perception of being strength within our context, to be a Black male, the antithesis of the emasculation that we all know so well.
Let me ask you this though, because it seems like to some extent those opinions are informed by like who you are today, which is kind of the second part of the question. What did it mean to you, I guess, more in the past, and how has it evolved to the definitions that I think you all are kind of talking about now?
So even like, as Jeff said, we have masculinity and we have toughness, and somehow those words became synonymous at some point. But I know a lot of tough people that are not masculine, and I know a lot of masculine men that are not tough. So, are you more masculine because you can change the rotors on your car, or are you more masculine because you're willing to sit down with your little girl and have tea time? and spend that time with them. So for me, I think masculinity is subjective. It's about, you know, how you show up. I might show up different for my people than you might show up, and you're not any less masculine because you showed up different. So I think it's such a fluid term at this point that it's really hard to define. Even, you know, back in the day, it was the Marlboro Man, cigarettes and doing all that. Today, it's just different.
I think that's interesting too, though, because I don't think there's anybody who would look at old film and watch Barry Sanders run and say, that dude is not masculine, whatever it means. But he took ballet, as did Kobe Bryant and other folks. So it is interesting that there's these definitions out there, but then it depends on who you're talking about, right? They have a certain level of status, then maybe that doesn't equate to the same thing if you were just an average Joe, so to speak. So, any other thoughts?
It's interesting when you bring up Barry Sanders and ballet. Brishnikov was an amazing athlete. He was a ballet dancer.
Right.
Alvin Ailey, I think he epitomizes what it is to be masculine as far as not just the productions that he's orchestrated, but the enterprises that he's led as well. And so, just interesting dynamic nonetheless.
Sure.
It's cool though to hear this very well-rounded group of gentlemen talk about this in this light, because to your point, your question, I'm not sure that would have been the conversation or the discussion we would have had if you would have asked me this 20 years ago.
Absolutely.
I'm pretty sure, and I wonder now, like with a lot of young men in particular, and we all work with younger men that we mentor, like how they define it. I remember growing up, you know, if you played ball and you found out that one kid was taking ballet, you teased that kid. Like that's just what it was when we were younger. So to hear this evolution of what black male masculinity looks like now is actually really encouraging. And for me, like I'm excited to hear how we're seeing this and shaping this as well.
What's interesting to me, what first pops into my head, I think about my experience in college about 5 years ago. So the 2016 to 2020 era, I think we were.
You just made everybody feel very old. Thank you. We definitely need your perspective.
But touching on that generational perspective, you know, I think being in this like kind of post Me Too era, and then also, you know, kind of being at a PWI that has its own different context, masculinity was often associated to either being toxic masculinity or hypermasculinity. And that was just, you know, the hot topics, and that's what everybody was, you know, debating over and standing on. And at that, you know, pivotal time of becoming a young man and figuring out myself, I'm grateful that I'm in a space now where I see masculinity as like a confidence in self, and seeing as this like responsibility and this rites of passage into being a man for my family, for my community. But it was interesting in that, you know, in 5 years ago, my answer probably would have been different and more defensive, you know, in talking about masculinity than it is now.
Yeah. Well, there's more. From media portrayals of aggression to expectations of being the provider, what stereotypes have most shaped or distorted how black men are viewed in this country?
As a kid, I don't even remember hearing that term often.
Agreed.
Unless it was in the context of somebody's masculinity being questioned, or somebody who was referencing masculinity as something that they needed to prove. And as a kid, like I'm not around a bunch of people who are having those sort of conversations. And so it wasn't until maybe even after college where it became more of a, like you said, now you're starting to get into more cultural, sort of stereotypical context of like what it means to be a man. But by that time, my definition of that was already sort of formed, but based on the people that raised me. So, you know, I was fortunate enough to have my dad in the household with me, but my parents were sort of the epitome of like partners, so that there were no man things versus woman things. Like if you live in this house and you are a part of this family, you do whatever needs to be done. So I saw my dad doing laundry. I saw my dad cooking. I saw my dad cleaning. But also, as long as there's a man in this house, your mother should never have to take the garbage out. As long as there's a man in here, your sister should never have to cut the grass or shovel the snow. So, you know what I'm saying? Like, but it wasn't like because you are a man, you have to do these things, or because she is a woman, she can't do these things. It was just more so courtesy, you know what I mean? More so than like, this is how you define being masculine, if you will. And so, by the time it started to become one of those things where people are looking at it through that cultural lens or that stereotypical lens of like, to be a man is to be tough, or to, you know what I'm saying, be able to do 1,000 push-ups in one sort of sitting, you know what I mean? To me, I'm not even looking at it and being like, yeah, for sure, that is what masculinity is. To me, I'm just looking at it, like, it always felt like when that word comes up, it's in the context of like, who's the strongest person in the room right now, who's the toughest person in the room, as opposed to like, kind of what you gentlemen already spoke on, like, who is the most vulnerable? Who is the person in the room who may not be the loudest, but everybody knows they can depend on? You know what I'm saying? Like, who can get up and lead in the way that any particular situation calls for?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I mean, both of you touched on the same point, which is this need to prove. Like, masculinity is also just automatically associated with demonstrating the masculinity, so to speak, which is interesting. It was funny, we talk about like media, and this is not specifically media, but I watched the Bud Crawford fight Saturday night, Sunday morning. And what's interesting to me is he talked about being at this point now, right? But what he always talked about was like, and they said, well, you've done it your way. They wouldn't promote him because he wasn't like willing to be a coon. He wasn't willing to just get in somebody's face and antagonize them just because, to prove a point. He would just go in the ring and outbox them, right? And so they said, well, he's not marketable. But what does marketable mean, right? In that vein. And so when you think about it, and that's not necessarily the media itself, but it's the byproduct of the media. But then the promoter says, well, I don't know, he may be the best boxer on planet Earth, but if we can't sell him,
Right.
particularly being a black male, as being aggressive, as being loud, as being flashy, we'll just put him on the shelf. And then ultimately, he obviously is at the pinnacle of his career now. So what are some other maybe stereotypes and things?
Yeah, I think that the whole idea of being aggressive and being aggressive and that proving that you're masculine is such a false premise, man. And for the most part, to me, it's more masculine to walk away from somebody that's trying to provoke you than it is to sit there and actually physically fight them or engage them in any type of reckless behavior. It as a man, you can go into a room and somebody can provoke you, and you can take your self-control, hold that in, and walk away from that. To me, that's so much more masculine than trying to prove I can whoop somebody or I can take you down. And so that's where I think, again, the lines have gotten crossed, because it used to be you're a man's man. That's all, what you used to say. You couldn't come in this room if you didn't dress this way, or if you didn't speak this way, or if, you didn't have this many women, things like that. All of those things are just ways to, in essence, like keep men down and keep them, trying to make them conform to, a definition that really, again, is just fluid. It's fluid. Nobody knows what masculinity is. I don't think, again, like Joy said, I didn't hear that word, and you were either tough or soft. That was it.
Yeah.
That was it.
My mom, man, I laugh because I think about what these gender roles and definitions of them are supposed to be. And growing up, I really didn't see that. Like, my mom taught me how to play sports. My mom was the baseball player that ran track, that was in RLTC, that could do push-ups, that could do all of that. And my dad was in the garage, taught me how to fix cars, how to build things, how to use my hands. And to your point too, George, like there was no gender role, but my dad was like, if you're home, your mom doesn't touch the garbage. If you're in the car, you pump the gas. Your sister doesn't cut the grass. It wasn't about a definition of gender. It was more about the privilege of the strength you have as a young man so that your mom doesn't have to do these things. But I also think like, it's interesting now that to your question, Curtis, I think about like Dave Chappelle too, who said like, I wasn't wearing a dress. I wasn't gonna wear a dress in certain roles because I didn't want to represent what black men look like in this way. And I don't know if that makes him more or less masculine, but I do appreciate the fact that he recognized he had a responsibility to represent what he wanted people to see on camera for the broader community. But Crawford, I think in the same way, it's like, I don't need to be aggressive or prove toughness. No, when I walk in a room, I'm probably the baddest man in the room and can box anybody. And I think as we've gotten older, this idea of prove it and toughness has been toxic to our community, especially for our young boys. Well, I think oftentimes when we see some of the violence in the community, especially gun violence, it's like, I'm scared to get whooped. I can't fight. I don't know how to manage my emotions properly, and so I run to go get a gun because I've never been taught masculinity in the terms of emotional intelligence, a way to express it in a very healthy way.
Dion, I'm gonna pick on you, Dion, just because I think Justice is the youngest in the room. You might have us about a couple of years, so you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, when you think about masculinity, to me, it's just a word too, because from far as I can remember back, my father always put a lot of different tools and stuff in my hand to make me conform, but it really was just a matter of me receiving all this, but I never got nothing out of masculinity. No one said that in our home. It just was like, this is what we need to do, this is the plan, let's move forward and get it done. It was all like a systematic thing, so I never had that transition to that either, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So my whole take on masculinity is just, like my man say, it's fluid. Like, it's just, we just go do things we have to do as men, and I don't know. It's the self-learned behavior plus it's whoever's over us, like our parents, a grandmother, whoever raised us, and that was what it was to me. So I can't see nothing outside of that.
This will not shock anybody. Black men are often told to be strong, never show weakness. I think we've already alluded to that, if not overtly stated it today. So what role should vulnerability and emotional honesty play in reclaiming a healthier, fuller sense of masculinity?
I think a lot of ways, just the concept of masculinity has evolved based on what like more recent generations have been exposed to and sort of allowed to do. So I think when you think about 50s, 60s, I don't think they had the luxury of being vulnerable. Like, I think in the context of that time, you had to be strong. You couldn't show weakness. You couldn't break down. You couldn't be scared. You couldn't, you know what I mean? Like, you had to move a certain way. And if that's all you know, then that's all you can teach. And I think as generations have kind of, passed, and each generation allows their kids to do more, allows them or creates space for them to be exposed to more, then you start seeing like, it doesn't just have to be sports. I can also do art if I want to, which, you know what I mean? It's not ballet, but it wasn't one of those things where, it could have been encouraged in the same way that like doing something more physical, doing something that shows how strong you are. I think, more recent generations have been allowed to use the language that, they have in terms of being vulnerable and expressing, I'm scared. I think.
Actually, sorry to cut you off, because the point that you're making about prior generations having the inability to, or the benefit of really being able to say, I'm afraid, or be vulnerable. I wonder if that's something that was just outwardly facing, because I don't know that you have the movements that you have, that people were not real behind closed doors saying, look, I'm afraid. We're gonna have to like organize and do things together, right? Because it wasn't like one person went marching because they were unafraid. You know what I'm saying? I feel like there had to be some conversations, and maybe for the world to see it was we're unified, we're unafraid, you know, but behind closed doors, I think the only thing that allowed them probably to be as strong as they were had to be some honest conversations.
Well,
you know?
I think that's a different. I think that's a different fear. You know, being like, hey, we have to come together so that we can march for these freedoms, versus me and you one-on-one, or with my wife or girlfriend or even daughter or son, being like, I don't want to go because I'm scared. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that same thing existed where they felt as comfortable or like they were allowed to be that scared, to say, hey fellas, I agree, we got to come together, I'm not going.
Can I ask y'all a question?
Yeah.
I saw it on both sides of my family. Both grandfathers were very hard men. One was born 1911. And my other grandfather, I think, was
It's a
born
great
like,
year, by the way.
It was a great year.
We agree.
Absolutely.
We agree. You agree?
19
Yeah, okay.
And the other one, I think my mom's dad was born in like 1939, 1940. So they grew up in Jim Crow. Both came up, one sharecropping family, Alabama and Georgia, respectively. They didn't talk about emotion a lot. Neither one. I really recall hearing my grandfather say, I loved you. And that wasn't words they used. They showed up. I don't know if you guys experienced that with the older men in your family, but I wondered to this question, like, because they didn't, was it because they weren't afforded the opportunity? Did they never learn that language? And I also wonder, like, how has that impacted our parents' generation, and how does that trickle down to us?
Well, I think for sure, you know, nowadays things are more accepted. So back in the day, there's certain things that you just didn't do.
Yeah.
And one of those things were, you know, you didn't show emotion. You were hard. You did not show fear. You did not show weakness at all. And that came from, you know, if you're talking about Jim Crow, that having the stuff that they had to deal with at that point in time is unimaginable to us right now. You know, like I never went through that. I mean, we experienced racism, but I never truly feared walking down the street or, you know, going in some place and somebody literally threatening my life, you know. So they had to have a tough exterior. And to your point, that has trickled down. You know, I can think about my dad, not a real emotional man. I can remember 2 times seeing him cry. One at my grandfather's funeral, and the second time was I won a bowl game in college, and he cried after I won the bowl game in college. Those were the 2 times. In between that, you know, he wasn't a hard man, but he wasn't an emotional man. So that just wasn't something that was prevalent in the house. Even my mom is not an emotional person, you know. So it's just a completely different mindset now.
And I think it is partially like the access to like the language. I think now people have a bigger toolbox to say it's not just fear. So it's not the same maybe hang up to say I'm scared, because now you have the language to say actually it's not fear, I'm anxious or I'm frustrated or, you know what I mean? Like I'm just a little, you know, sensitive to this thing because of this experience. Whereas before, everything is probably, you know, couched under one word. Like you scared or you soft. And it's like, I'm not soft, I'm cautious. I'm not scared, I'm smart, because I know what this, you know, yeah, like if I do this, then this can happen. So it's not about fear.
Yeah.
I'm being protective of, you know, not just myself, but the people I'm with. I think as time evolved and you have access to more language and you have access to more sort of things inside that emotional tool bag that you know you can access and you know you can use, I think that also helps in terms of just being able to communicate with people and your willingness to want to communicate, because you know you have the information to kind of back that up.
All right, this has been too tame. So somebody called the audible, and the next question I have, I'm really interested to see, because this is gonna be a provocative one. Is homosexuality and masculinity antithetical?
No.
Probably easier to answer today than it would have been 20 years ago. I don't think there would have been a quick no if we had this conversation
I don't think so either, because I don't think we had examples. 20 years ago, we knew there were men who were probably gay that lived closeted.
But it might have been more than 20 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, but in every definition of how we think about masculinity, they showed up in that way. They just weren't out often, right? And I think now we have a lot of examples of strong men who choose to live their lives, have chosen their partners, and that doesn't define them as a man. That's my belief. I know now, again, I read a lot of online comments. Everybody doesn't feel that way in our community.
So I think one thing that we're all touching on and that we're bumping up against is the difference. We're using it interchangeably, but the difference between manhood and masculinity. And I know some really masculine and really, strongly gay men, and I also know some more feminine gay men, that express themselves differently. And then of course, people of all different identities and backgrounds in the way in which they express themselves. But I think when I think of manhood, similar to what a lot of us have named, I think a lot about responsibility. I think a lot about taking care of the home. I think about early on learning how to mow the grass, when I need to mow the grass, and why it's important that I do it before the grass gets too high. I learned how to tinker with the fan and learn how to figure out or try to fix things before getting a new one. And I learned the importance of taking out the trash, and especially, not letting the trash get too full to where my mama either has to ask me to take out the trash or she has to do it herself, right? So all these things around manhood, I think, I've understood them as taking care of home and taking care of family, irregardless of, if that means that I'm, presenting masculine, or if I'm, doing it and showing off, as I do it, or, whatever that kind of perception of the masculine or feminine is. And I think fast forwarding to today, as a man, I feel that, when it comes to my dad, we have this mode of, what do we need to do to take care of the family, to check in on my little sister that's in college or my little brother that's in high school? Like, how are we making moves together so that they're good in a very functional type of way? But then with my mom, I think I do have to move in a more feminine way, that because I am her son and because I'm the man of the house, with my mom, I gotta check in, you know what I'm saying? And I gotta ask how she's doing for real and ask that follow-up question and check in on her health, which, that is the more emotional side, that is the more soft side. But in doing that and in showing up in that way for my family, that is reinforcing manhood in a way that isn't inherently masculine.
So do you think masculinity is measured the same way in a straight man as it is a gay man? Is there a different spectrum? So if you're a gay gentleman, how are you perceived as opposed to a straight gentleman? I mean, I don't know the answer to that, but I do feel like as a society we do tend to see gay men as feminine. I don't care, what profession they're in. There's now gay NFL players. There's gay bodybuilders. It doesn't matter. For some odd reason, they're still deemed feminine or less than.
And on the equal and the opposite, we actually will ascribe masculinity. We'll see men who are ladies' men, right? Who have all the women as more masculine as opposed to less. So we almost create these measuring or litmus tests based on, and I think it's intertwining again, both now sexuality, manhood, and masculinity in a way where we overlap those.
Yeah, I think, and maybe this is more of a question, because y'all would have this perspective based on y'all's generation.
Y'all were all
Well, no, check it out. Because in this context of masculine, feminine, how you express yourself, what I don't understand, because I didn't experience it, when Prince came on the scene, the women were going crazy.
Right.
And he was getting all the ladies because he was, really expressing his feminine side, but was also the man because he was owning that feminine side. But it was a feminine thing versus a masculine thing, but the result was what we attribute to masculinity. So that's one of those kind of
So
like
then-
how you make that. How does that fit into
Prince
this?
is just Prince, first of all.
But I mean, he still had those challenges where society still, you know, I know you got women, but something else is there.
Right.
And,
Yeah, like the chaps on or whatever. People are like, wait a minute. What is this?
wait a minute. And
But see, I think
it's about the fashion
it's-
choice.
Even thinking about that and that kind of like when you think about how he presented, but what was his energy? Like what's the content of what he's talking about?
Right.
Mostly sexual energy. at that
Right.
point,
So
yeah.
women are looking at that as his masculinity is being sort of manifested through how he's talking, like how he's communicating. What's that communication? What's the messaging versus how the messenger is showing up? So like men are looking like what's to that guy? You know what I mean? And the women are like, what's up? You know what I'm saying? Because you know what I'm saying? Like that energy, it was perceived as masculine to the people who it was meant for. So I think, you know, it is a thing of interchanging manhood versus masculinity in a way that, you know, like how is masculinity defined really? Because I think that's the better question. Like, what is masculinity?
I totally agree with you because theoretically, there's false equivalence between masculinity and femininity, particularly on the spectrum of what it means to be female or woman, right? Feminist versus womanist. Gwendolyn Brooks, the whole notion of womanism, whereby to embrace womanism does not mean that you diminish being or the male equivalent or the male factor, whereas being feminist is to the ultra extreme. And I hope I'm not messing this up. But more specifically in this context, we're talking about one's sexuality or the sexual content, defining the measuring rod or the metric, if you will, in a skew. But we suggest that Bayard Rustin or Langston Hughes is less masculine because
Well, James Baldwin.
in particular.
Right, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, because of their sexual preference. But then you ask the question, what's the utility of masculinity? Is it based off of preference or your utility as a person, or your utility as a man?
Yeah.
When you commit to authentic voices, when you trust powerful stories, recognition follows. 2 Emmy nominations, the first in our history. Stream the Emmy-nominated programs now on cantv.org or on the CanTV Plus app. CanTV. Experience the power of community television.
Hi, I'm Dr. Candace Norcott. On this season of Be Well, we'll explore issues of emotional and mental well-being, centering Black women and men in an honest, engaging, and relatable way. From navigating generational trauma and microaggressions to managing stress in relationships. Join the conversation on CanTV Cable Channel 19 or stream live on cantv.org or on the CanTV Plus app. Elevated conversation and storytelling. Experience the power of community television.
It's interesting as we talk about like masculinity associated with being like strong and things like that. Like you said, tough and soft. I don't know. Everybody don't necessarily have children, but one of the toughest things I can ever imagine is to actually carry a child and push it out. I remember my grandmother told me flat. You knew Granny.
Yeah.
She was like, your uncle, he was 13 pounds. She always vowed she would never go back to a Catholic hospital because they didn't believe in
Pain relief or anything.
epidural.
They just had your
So
kid.
she had a 13-pound baby,
With no epidural.
and Granny's 5'2". You know, so
She tough.
yeah, I say that to say that's the toughest thing that you could possibly imagine. But on the other side of things, it's like, you know, if you walk out in front of a train, you're really strong. Like that's you know what I'm saying? Like, you know. But I'm sorry, you guys go ahead. I think I gotta move us on. Oh, you okay? Yeah, for sure. All right, I feel like we touched on some of these. So this one, how do friendships, brotherhood, and accountability among Black men help to redefine masculinity in ways that are healing instead of harmful?
I mean, I think it goes to kind of what's been mentioned a few times today, and I think, you know, masculinity and manhood, as much as we interchange them, I think what it really comes down to is, as a person, as a human, how are you creating space for the people around you to feel safe, to feel seen, to feel empowered, to feel encouraged? And I think this notion of manhood is a sort of construct of, like, if a man and woman are in a room at the same time, by default, the man is in charge, or the man is, you know what I'm saying? Like, that is manhood. How comfortable are you being the person to answer these questions, or jump in front of the car if it's coming, or do these things? And I feel like how that has evolved, for me at least, is how comfortable are you creating space? So if I'm in a room with my wife, I know she's the smartest person in the room. You know what I'm saying? So I don't feel like less of a man if what she's, you know, if she's taking an opportunity to, like, lead us through something, do your thing.
Yeah, I know.
If I know that, you know what I'm saying, you are the person who has these answers, but I also understand when she is looking to me to step up and be that leader. In that situation, manhood now is defined by, are you ready to take the lead and do what needs to be done so that, you know, it gets done. So I feel like that notion of, like, brotherhood and friendship and, you know, creating those spaces where you feel comfortable saying, hey, George, I have to get this off. You know what I'm saying? I've been feeling like this, I've been feeling like that. And no, I'm not going to be like, man, don't come around me with that. You know what I mean? Like, and I feel like when you find people who you can feel safe like that around, and who you can feel vulnerable with, and know I can express how I feel, whatever that is, and not be judged in any type of way, or not, you know, have to wear some of these cultural, you know, yeah, that people assume are supposed to be worn by men.
Sure. You guys want to add? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you know, piggybacking on what he was saying, is just, you know, you want to just feel normal, and that's your way of feeling normal. With some normality to it was just be yourself, and I mean, and let people just judge. And I think we get caught up in too much of the hoopla, and just be a man as best you can be. If it's liking of men or whatever it is, you know, everybody go towards how they feel, what they, you know, what they can do. You know what I'm saying? As far as a man, and what you present to people in the world. You know, I just feel like it's just too much broadcast in on it. If people let people just be whatever they're gonna be, you know what I mean, and don't judge. So
yeah, I was with a group of brothers recently, man. We were sitting down maybe about 3 or 4 months ago, and somehow we got on the topic of healthcare, and brothers started talking about, like, we don't talk about healthcare a lot. So when we started talking about, like, what we were experiencing, where we are in our 40s, talking about going to get your prostate exam, and another brother was like, I had the colonoscopy, I had to have it early because I got a family history. And then brothers started talking about blood pressure. And most of the brothers in the room were taking blood pressure meds. And we were like, wait, and then one brother was like, I got diabetes. And it was a safe space to actually have this conversation. But what it's now created is a room of accountability. So now when we're out, we're like, hey, let's drink some water today, right? Let's have some water. You know, you might have scotch, but sprinkle in some water too. Or we're talking about, like, hey man, I made the food, but I actually took the salt content down, knowing that it's important. That wasn't something we did, but I think what I found is that because brothers have created a safe space, and we're able to have this conversation of accountability and show up in a way that's authentic, we can talk about this. So yeah, you talk about, like, this is actually going to lead to better outcomes for our lives too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, masculinity is not a topic if you check out early. So I mean, that's all too important. I feel like maybe George had the questions in advance because he touched on this already as well. But in reclaiming Black masculinity, how do we make sure that it's not about dominance, that it's about partnership, especially with Black women and with our communities at large? And I think not just you, everybody, you've talked about it as well, like and you as well with your parents and their different roles. but now about us.
Yeah.
And we're talking about reclaiming the definition. How do we ensure it's not about just, having to be the smartest guy or the toughest guy and so on in the room? How do we make sure that it's about partnership and so on?
Yeah, I think once again it's about how you showing up and who you're showing up for. So my wife might see my masculinity different than my son, than my daughter, than my mother, everybody. You have to be able to adapt to that specific person in general. You cannot just have one definition of what masculinity is, because everybody is different. Every single person you interact is different. I can come to you and have a manly conversation, but I probably couldn't go to my brother and have a certain conversation because he might not accept it the same way. So I think the one thing that we always have to be conscious of is who our audience is, how we're speaking. It's up to us to deliver the message in a way that whoever I'm delivering it to accepts it. You can't just be one cookie cutter message to it.
Yeah, I think, and Jeff touched on the word accountability, and I think that's really big in reclaiming Black masculinity. It's this certain essence when you have those moments where you just gotta get together with the guys, right? Yeah. And you're talking through things and you're opening things up, and you're not at work, right, where you're competing, to be the best at what you're doing. It's not on the social scene where, for better or for worse, you are trying to present a certain type of way, you're trying to step a certain type of way, whatever. But having those moments where it's like, man to man, brother to brother, we're seeing each other because you as a man are like becoming the leader of your own life. I as a man am becoming the leader of my own life. And I'm seeing you right now and saying, bro, if this is, I know the life you're trying to lead, and like, you got to get right, you know what I'm saying? Or you said you were going to do this over and over again over the past couple of months and nothing has happened. So man to man, I'm not checking you because I'm judging you. I'm not checking you because, I need you to get your weight up and get like me, but I'm checking you because I'm leading my life in this way. And you said you leading your life in this way, so I have that. It's almost like the code word to really see someone and say, I'm saying this for you. And because we have this essence of accountability and masculinity, you're not going to take offense to it, because the only motive I have is to make you better and to build you up as we both are leading our lives.
You said something there, man, and you hit on it. You very, right there. I think one of the things that has been healthy for me to unlearn as I've gotten older, we talk about the age thing, is removing competition from the baseline of masculinity and friendships. Yep. And most of my friendships were built because we hooped together, we played sports, and we did that every day. We were competing. But then when you're offline, you take the mask off, you get to sit in the room, you spoke to it. Like when we're not at work, being able to remove that and actually have real dialogue has been something that's been really powerful in building myself as a man and watching my brothers around me do that as well, which I think we need to do to reclaim masculinity and also do this with our women. They're not our competition. My favorite part of the Proverbs 31 scripture, and not to get churchy, but to talk about it, is that the man was respected as an elder at the gate by the elders at the gate because of the woman he had.
I think
I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, in general, I think everybody is here to be used, because what are we if we can't be resources to those who need us? So I think part of that redefinition or that reclaiming of manhood and masculinity is first understanding what tools you possess that would be helpful to people around you, and then your willingness or vulnerability or level of vulnerability to say, here are the tools that I have, so that whether it's your brother, your friend, the women in your life, they know when I need this thing, I can depend on Jeff, I can depend on Josh, but that in itself, to me, takes a certain amount of vulnerability and sort of masculinity, if you will, to say, hey, here is what I bring. Here is what I am, whether it's you need a shoulder, cool. Like you said, you know, if you need a shoulder, your brother, that's not in this toolkit. You know what I'm saying? But you know that. So even that comes with a bit of accountability and knowing that's just not in your box of tools of things that I can access. So, who are those people who have those tools, and at the same time, what are the tools that you have in your kit where you, like you said, your son knows when I need daddy to be this, that's the tool that I can pull from. Your wife is, she's looking for something different. But I think part of our responsibility as men is to say, number one, I'm going to recognize what those tools are. I'm going to do the work to sharpen those tools and expand my box as much as I can when I can, and then let people know, hey, if you need me, here's the tools that I have that are at your disposal. And I think even to that point, all three of you have been resources to me, and I'm at a place where I'm like, I'm 27, I'm not just Lil Bro no more, where I can just see y'all and be like, no, I know, I just can't. I thought this was
going back to the age.
But for real, just hitting that point where it's like, I'm not just here to say like, how can I continue to get these resources, but now I gotta go, look at the young homies and the little bros, and I think that's also part of that reclamation, taking out the competition of, I'm trying to take their spot or they trying to take mine. Instead, like, no, I gotta. Everything that's been poured into me, I got to pour that as well. And that's missing sometimes.
That competition piece is a fallacy anyway. It just is.
Yeah.
I have one that I would like maybe just one or two people to touch on briefly, because the final question I want everybody to touch on. I know it's going to take a little bit of time. Mental health challenges remain stigmatized among men, especially black men. We talked about this a little bit the first time. But how does reclaiming identity include making space for therapy, healing, and self-care?
I just think, again, masculinity, the one thing I keep thinking about and going back to is being masculine is not being above critique or criticism. So you have to be able, you can be a masculine man, but you have to be able to accept that you're not going to get everything right. So you have to go to therapy. You have to go to somebody that's going to provide the tools for you, because you don't have all the answers. So again, being masculine doesn't mean you have to be hard-headed. You have to seek it out.
That self-care piece is critical too. I think we talked a lot about therapy and things on the first episode. We didn't talk as much about self-care. So if anybody wants to touch on that.
It's interesting, the whole term of being okay with being okay. And as we just sit here and process, a lot of what we deem as being masculine is really projected on us from majority culture, right? My mother, Jeff, to a certain extent, defined what masculinity should be. I remember we were going on a trip, 6th grade, late night, to go to a funeral the next morning, and my mother just started to lie to me and saying, man, you need to be able to change a tire and be the protector, and your dad used to open the door and he doesn't do it anymore. And that's what a man's supposed to be. But more specifically, the whole notion you talk about dominance, I'd be lying to say that my wife does not want me to dominate in certain aspects of my life.
Sure.
Financially, protecting the house, even some of the chores around the house, to be honest with you, to make a way for those things. But the space to be able to talk about it when you don't feel like being that person, or when raising up to that standard becomes overwhelming. Therapy has helped me manage those things, because there's some times where I just want to self-select out of certain situations.
Absolutely.
I don't want to be bothered. I want to say the hell with it all.
So this is our final question. I want to make sure everybody has an opportunity to answer it. So we're going to go around this way, I guess. If we were to rewrite the narrative of black masculinity for the next generation, what would you want it to look like for your sons, nephews, and young brothers coming up? And a few of you have sons, so start with you and work our way around.
Just be confident. Be confident in how you show up in any room. Make sure you do the work to, again, understand what you bring. And as long as you're confident in what you bring, then you know how to discern what people need. And when you show up and you know what's not for you, that makes it easier to leave when it's time to leave, stay when it's time to stay. So just being confident in what you know and what you don't know.
Justin?
Yeah, I'd say we gotta really reverse the idea that chivalry is dead, and bring back just like those like gentleman values. And that's one of the things that I'm proudest that everybody in my family, you know, all rankings, mom, pops, grandma, grandpa, you know, everybody really focused on, you know, walk on the outside on the curb, get that door, you know what I'm saying? Outside in the club, at the bar, whatever, like be as respectful as you can be. And I think that can sometimes get lost. But if we really focus on those like values of, you know, what I think is like a true and pure masculinity, I think that can go a really long way, especially for the youngins.
So I just really, I almost got emotional thinking about my little guy, but I just want him to understand, and these young guys to understand, that there is strength in weakness and vulnerability. You cannot always be the rock. There are times where somebody needs to pour into you as well, and you have to be okay with that. And you know, I just think about how emotional my son is, and how at times I have to catch myself and making sure that I don't criticize that emotion, that he's understands that it's okay. And that's what I'm just saying. You have to be vulnerable. You have to show weakness. Otherwise, you know, you'll be self-sabotaging for your entire life.
1, 2, 3.
Okay, well, if masculinity and everything, and bringing that to the table, I have a son that's like he's 27 years old, and the only thing he can see, and he told me this, so he was like, I watched you, Dad, I watched you, and you navigated through this and this situation, that situation. It made me a better man. So I know me putting that out there on just being a full person and willing to respect people, for one, show them whatever tools I could show them out of my toolbox, which was learning, troubleshooting, or whatever it is. I never had a problem with it, and he spoke to me about that, and that really made me feel like I touched something, you know what I mean? To watch a 27-year-old kid that grew up in this time of day and still being able to focus on his goals and being able to move forward. So,
Aaron, you might end up with the last word. So, I mean, tell us what you teach in Thompson, man.
You know, be engaged, and with that, well, I want to be engaged because there's still more development for him. He's be 21, sophomore at college, and just within his overall development within their age group. My personal assistant is 26, and he really clings to positive interactions with black men, be it at the church, being at business meetings, but he understands that the best tools are the examples that we set. And so, in particular for Thompson, as long as I'm here, but more specifically, if I'm not here, plug in, get a group, get some accountability partners, not just your peers, but people who are older, to pour into you. And then once you're poured into, pour back out to other people.
That's a weird way to wrap, man. Appreciate you, all you fellas, for the conversation.
Word.
They say television is about sitting back. We say it's about stepping up. Your block has stories worth telling. Your neighbors have voices worth hearing. Chicago has a heartbeat worth sharing. Stop watching their world. Start showing yours. It's time to tune in and be seen. Can TV, always here, always yours. Experience the power of community television.
For more than 40 years, CAN TV has been Chicago's voice, your voice. We've shared your stories, amplified your concerns, and celebrated your triumphs. Now we want to hear from you. What programs matter most? What issues should we cover? How can we better serve your community? Visit cantv.org/feedback today. CAN TV. Experience the power of community television.
Tonight, we've heard powerful voices, men willing to be honest, to be vulnerable, and to challenge the narrow definitions that have too long boxed in what it means to be a black man in America. We talked about the weight of stereotypes, the silence of generations, and the very real consequences on our health, our relationships, and our communities. But we've also heard about the possibilities, about brotherhood, healing, and rewriting the story of Black masculinity on our own terms. Reclaiming our identity isn't about discarding strength. It's about expanding it, making room for love, for vulnerability, for creativity, and for care. It's about refusing to let others define us and instead standing in the fullness of who we are. Thank you for making time in your day for this critical conversation. Until next time, keep showing up for yourself and for each other.